Okay, so first off, I want to start off and just say, first off, thank you for being here for my interview. I just want to introduce us a little bit and let the audience kind of know that, we do know each other as filmmakers. That I want to start off saying that, I used to, your movie, What the Bleep, which I want to get into your back history and your backstory a little bit. I want to say that, What the Bleep was a very eye-opening movie for me when I was a believer. It was one of the things that I still to this day respect, even though I debate, you and me debate a lot. I want the audience to know that, we know each other and we respect each other as filmmakers, even if we agree to disagree. But what I'm really interested in is the story, like where you were at, how you came to where you're at. I remember in a lot of your interviews you say, before you made the Bleep, you were one of the least spiritual person in the world. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Paint a picture of your filmmaking career and why were you the least spiritual person in the world?
Well, I think in terms of what spirituality is, I mean, we tend to define spiritual people as people who have, some sort of practice, some sort of they go to church or they go to some sort of, meditation and they, wear crystals and stuff like that. I mean, they have something that they connect with on a deeper level. And I was living in what I call my shoe consciousness, which is that my spirituality was about shoes and cars. And I was a line producer in the movie business, and I was doing lots and lots and lots of low budget movies. I made an excellent career for myself, in the $2.5 to $5 million budget range, and I just did terrible movie after terrible movie. And it was kind of soul killing for me because I love film. I love telling stories, and I love exploring ideas. And the films that I was doing at that time were like the antithesis of exploring ideas. And so I literally quit Hollywood for a while, and I started a company that made gourmet dog treats because, I'm entrepreneurial at spirit. Mm-hmm. It makes perfect sense. You make movies and porn and random stuff, and then you go make dog treats. I know. But it was great opportunity for me to learn how to just get out into the world and explore my own. What can I do? And then, that kind of fell apart, and the Bleep came to me. It was a completely different movie at the time. It was called Sacred Science, and it was a very different movie than what we ended up making. But the concept, the ideas that, what we think affects our life was really a profound learning for me. And I can go back on the Bleep now and say, oh, okay, well, that was a little, okay, well, maybe that wasn't exactly right. And okay, we took that one too far. And well, that research has been disproved. Of course. But at the time, that's what we knew. And even to this day, much of what I learned from the Bleep, I still use in my life. Absolutely. And so I think that's one of the things that made the Bleep so successful was that, at its core, it was a very straightforward, simple movie. We used a lot of cool science, some of which, like I said, you can look back on and go, okay, maybe we stretched that too far. But, there's a lot of it that at the time people said we were nuts, and a lot of it now is people are coming out and saying, well, actually, it's scientifically sound. And a lot of it's turning less into spirituality and more into behavioral science.
Right. So before you started the movie, what kind of worldview did you have? Were you Catholic before? Were you New Age? Did you have any beliefs before?
I was raised Catholic, but I had a really interesting upbringing in religion. My dad was a musical director for a Catholic church, a Baptist church, a Methodist church, Episcopalian church. Sometimes he went into the synagogue. And so I spent some of my Sundays just driving around with him to all these different churches. And so from a very early age, I actually write about this in my book, I remember being baffled a little bit and asking my dad, well, why do they have all these different groups kind of saying the same thing? Maybe the stories are a little bit different, but they're all kind of saying the same thing. And my dad said, it's a really good question, and maybe one day you'll figure that out. And I actually think that's that moment when I was 8 years old of him saying, maybe you're going to figure that out, Betsy. Maybe you'll bring everybody together, was somewhere buried in the back of my head. And that's kind of the journey that I'm on now.
When you started with What the Bleep, what was the transformational point? Was the movie your transformational point into thinking different? Was there something before that?
It was the movie. I literally started on the Bleep not having ever read a book on quantum physics. I went to a yoga class, and oddly enough, right before I started the Bleep, This was way back in the day. It's not that long ago, but it sounds like centuries ago. We didn't have like the internet like we have now. Can you imagine? Like it's only 10, 12 years ago.
It's crazy.
But it sounds like 100 years. And so I started taking the Self-Realization Fellowship, had a newsletter about meditation. And imagine trying to learn how to meditate while reading a newsletter. Like, so you'd read and then you'd sit and then you go, okay, what am I supposed to do now? Like, so I started looking into that, but even today, like people ask me all the time, well, what's your spiritual practice? I don't really have a spiritual practice. What I got from the Bleep, more than quote spirituality or metaphysics, was a very deep understanding of how my brain works and how to think. And that to me was my transformation. Just having that aha moment of going, oh, the thing in my head, this brain, that actually works in a certain way, and I actually can be in charge of that.
Right.
That was the biggest piece for me.
Well, obviously this is a film about beliefs, so what is a belief?
Well, I think that a belief, I have a book, it's called Tipping Sacred Cows, which is kind of all about what we believe, basically, and why we believe it, how we attach meaning. And so to me, a belief is usually something that you don't question. You accept it. Some people would say, I have faith. Some people would say belief. Sometimes I think the words belief and faith are intertwined. They're kind of the same thing. They're interchangeable. But it's something that you know in your soul, your heart, your mind to be true. And so typically we have these beliefs, and there are beliefs, about the world, and then there's beliefs about ourselves. And so I think it's a human condition to have beliefs. I don't think we can operate without them. We have to believe, like I have to believe that there is a chair here and that when my body moves to sit in it, something is going to catch me. That's a belief. I have faith that the chair is there. Even though science might say that there really isn't a chair or that you're not actually touching the chair, I still have to believe it. Otherwise, I wouldn't move my body to sit. So that's a belief,
Now, obviously I live in Sedona, and a lot of people have different types of beliefs, and the one thing I'm always trying to challenge is, how do we determine which beliefs are more closer to being accurate and correct? What is a process that you think that a lot of people come to in determining if something is true?
Well, so you and I have this argument a lot. I mean, I think truth is subjective. I think that we, as humans, are very attached to knowing, to holding on to the bag of truth. And the reason that we do that is because it's a lot easier and you feel safer. Like, think of it. We operate most of the time out of fear and in fight or flight. That's where we are. Because it's friggin' crazy in this world, right? Like, it's crazy. So if we can say this is truth and I know it, it gives us a sense of safety. And it gives us a sense of peace that we can take the next step forward. We can feel like, okay, I'm okay. So that's what really people are looking for when they're looking for truth. If they can say this is true, then they'll feel safe. In the last 10 years of my life, especially in the last 5 years, because I spent a lot of time after the Bleep came out thinking I knew the truth and running around the world proselytizing it. And then everything in my world kind of fell apart. And I had to really step back and go, well, gee, everything that I thought was true maybe isn't true. And so I live in my life right now less concerned with truth in the sense that it is this solid, immovable object. And I realize that truth is subjective, and it's almost always based on my belief system and my perspective. And that it might change, even in science. We interview, and I are lucky to get to talk to some of the greatest minds in science, right? I interviewed a guy last year who was one of the scientists who discovered the Higgs boson, right? And, he was willing to say to me that, look, science, has a truth, and then that's the truth until we prove another truth. And so, nothing ever really stays locked and solid. And so I actually love it there now. That's not a very comfortable place for most people to be.
What's interesting, like you even said in your book, is that you had a belief and then you kind of question it. Tell me a little bit about what that belief is. What was the catalyst to make you question it, and what did you learn from questioning it? Well,
so the big thing in the Bleep, in the big whole new way, my book is a lot about not only tipping my personal sacred cows, but tipping the sacred cows of the new age, new thought world. In the my film, The Bleep, that sort of made the concept, I create my reality, like the buzzword of the day, right? And we, humans, being who we are, I mean, leave it up to us to take that concept and make it all about us, right? You know, it's like, so I create my reality, I am the creator. And to some degree, that is true. But here's the difference between what I think people thought about that we were saying in The Bleep and what I understand to be true now. So my truth when I was making The Bleep might have been, or probably was, that I believed that I was literally creating reality. That like literally that was there, and all the things that were popping, I was creating, right? And 10 years go by where I lived that. And then all of a sudden, things start going wrong or going awry. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't create that, and I'm not creating that, and gee, why did that happen? And then you go back and you re-examine the idea, the belief. And for me, the belief was, okay, let me look at what science says. So I went out and I started asking some really great physicists, do I really create reality? Like, can you explain this to me? And for instance, the Institute of Noetic Science did some great studies on the whole concept of, do we create reality? Are we really capable of manipulating matter? Because let's talk about it. Reality is matter, okay? And so what they found, and I'm going to say this in like the most layman way I can because it's much more complex than what I'm going to explain to you, is that they brought in a bunch of like the top meditators. I'd like to get that gig, wouldn't you? Wouldn't that be like a great, like on my resume, I am a top meditator. And they brought them in and they gave them an assignment to basically move matter with their minds intentionally. And what they found was that yes, it's possible that they could, but that it was so small that it was almost impossible to measure. So in a way, yes, we are intentionally, they've shown, moving matter. But the truth is, like, you and I are not going to sit here and because we want Mercedes and BMWs, they're not going to come flying out of our butt because typically it's just not possible. You know, you and I alone, it's a collective thing. But what we are creating is our perception of it. That's what I think, to me, when I say I create my reality, that's my new definition of it. I'm less concerned about that I can meditate and gold coins will come flying out of the sky, because it's like mostly not going to happen. There are very few, even though science says that could be possible, it's highly unlikely because most people are just not that good at it, right? And one of the reasons why we're incapable of manifesting matter is because our belief systems will tell us that we can't.
And when I question the law of attraction, I've talked to some people, including in this film, that's the one thing that concerns me is when people are using problem-solving skills for things that they think are solving a problem. For example, maybe somebody really needs money and they think, well, I'm just not being positive enough. It's not coming into my life.
I agree with you.
And sometimes it creates more harm and stuff. So where do we separate the beliefs between what we want to believe and where it creates harm?
Well, okay, so let's talk about harm for a second. You know, there's harm, like as in somebody is injured, killed, like that's harm, right? And then there's the harm where, you know, the person who really needs money decides instead of going out and getting a job, I'm going to sit in my house and meditate, and then starves to death, right? So without like sounding insensitive and horrible, you know, this person made that choice. And so they caused harm to themselves. And you could say, well, it's because of those people that wrote those books and did all that stuff, and they believed them, and that those books shouldn't have been written, because if that book hadn't been written, that guy would have gone and gotten a job. But, you know, we are responsible. Part of what we have to start doing is taking personal responsibility back. You know, my life, this is one thing I do like about the concept of I create my reality. Guess what? I am ultimately responsible for it. You know, everything in it. Now, so does that mean that if I go out into the world and someone does something to me that's horrible, did I create that? Is it my fault? These are very nuanced subjects and concepts. My problem with the law of attraction is they take all those nuances out. They take the nuance and the concept of, you can make a vision board that says, I want to have all this stuff. And you can sit and meditate on that vision board till you're blue in the face. But if you haven't really done your own personal work and understanding, well, why do I want that Mercedes? What does that Mercedes represent to me? Why is it that I need a Mercedes in order to be happy? That's the work. And so when you do that work, what most of the time you find is like, oh, I don't actually want a Mercedes, and I really do want to get a job. That's what I should be doing. That's the work. we've kind of simplified everything to the point where it's like, look, it's all magic. It's not all magic. Existing in this reality and creating reality takes work. And it takes a little bit. Amakaswamy, who's my favorite physicist, has a great saying. He says, doobie doobie do, right? You have to do, which is mass to mass, pick up, go get the chair, get the table, do that. And then you have to be, which is the quiet reflection that sits back and says, what is it that I want to bring into my life? What is it that I desire? How can I create into the world? Okay, that's the being, and then I can dream that, and then I have to go out and do it. A lot of times people get stuck in either all do, or all be, and that's where the problem, I think, lies.
So what do you think then is the difference between psychology and understanding human behavior than someone who's making like a movie like The Secret and says, you know, there's some force out there, if I think enough of it, it's going to come into my life, versus if I just observe reality enough and use psychology? And, you know, does Donald Trump use the law of attraction? They understand psychology, but I don't think they're using metaphysics to gain their successes, where some people might think that.
Well, and who's to say what's the difference? I mean, I think there's a lot of things now where, you know, I can describe a lot of what people might term spiritual as just behavioral science. Like, I did a workshop the other day, and, you know, I said to everybody, listen, this is not a spiritual workshop, or it is a spiritual workshop. You get to decide what you want to call spiritual, because for me, spirituality isn't this practice or Buddhism or only this. The minute we came out of the womb, the minute we popped out of the vagina, we're having a spiritual experience. Everybody asks me, they'll say, when did you start your spiritual journey? And I say, the minute I came out of the vagina. That's it. That's when, hello, welcome to this plane. Here's your spiritual journey. Go. You don't get on the spiritual journey. You are born into it. And maybe that's for me why I look at the stuff with behavioral science as something that is really positive, because it's knowledge and data. It's taking, you know, people will say all the time, well, the mystics, they all had it right? And some people will say, well, all the mystics are dead. So, you know, how do you know? But if you go, I enjoy going back and reading some of the ancient texts and then looking at the science that's coming out and saying, wow, all we're really doing is creating a new language that is more accessible to you and I in our modern world. But, you know, many of the ancient, you know, tribes and the indigenous people, you know, a lot of them talked about a lot of the stuff that we talk about in behavioral science. They just use different languaging. They just use different words, you know. So for me, I don't see a disconnect there. I don't see a battle. I see a coming together of. That just might be my perspective.
So if we were, because you're talking about spirituality, we had this conversation last night. How would you define spirituality?
I just did. Everything is spiritual. You know, we are spiritual beings. And now, so here's the thing. That is a very broad definition of spirituality. Mm-hmm. And I don't even like the word spirituality because I think it's overused. A really great friend of mine, a wonderful teacher and shaman named Frank, said to me one time that the English language is kerplunk. And he said, basically, and if you think about what's going on, like with our young people and texting, like we are slowly devaluing communication, right? It is becoming, I mean, literally, instead of you and I having a conversation, we could sit here and in TLOGG, in one letter, you and I could have a conversation, right? The nuances are getting lost in that, right? So the problem with words like spirituality or enlightenment or even metaphysics is that nobody really knows what they mean. So you and I will be having a conversation where you're going to throw out the word spirituality and I am, and our definitions are completely different. And that's part of the reason why I think we're horrible communicators. We have horrible communication because the definition of the words that we're using are no longer concise. They don't make sense. So how you and I have a completely different definition of spirituality.
So how would we define the process of the epistemology and saying, okay, the process of the reality that I'm living in right now, okay? Is it something metaphysical beyond what I can sense? Or is it something that we've created because that's what we try to make sense of? What is our epistemology?
So who is the we that created? I don't know that answer in terms of who's the we that created this reality.
Well, I'll give you an example of just what I hear as beliefs. For example, in the Christian belief, they believe that it's God, Yahweh, that did
guy,
it.
Right.
And obviously in Islam, they believe in a different type of God.
Right.
Muhammad is their prophet. Scientology has a different type of belief.
Aliens, but they all have. The interesting thing about most religions is that they all have a greater being outside of them. And that's a pretty consistent in terms of all the different religions and philosophies. And even if you look at some of the ancestral religions or the indigenous religions, there's always a greater being, a greater being, which I find fascinating. But here's the thing, I don't know. And I'm not ready to say, I always laugh sometimes and I'll think, boy, won't it be funny if I die and those Christians were totally right? I can't. And this physicist that I interviewed, he was really powerfully profound for me because he said, we don't have the language yet or really the equipment, the tools to measure what that is. But we're going to keep looking. So until, and every time we think we get close enough, we realize, we've got so far to go. And that may be what part of our human journey is this quest to know who made us. And that's part of the human condition. You talk about why do people believe? And I think people believe because a life without belief is empty. We couldn't operate as humans. If you didn't believe love, then how could you love your child? If you didn't believe that, life was worth living, you would die. Essentially, we, as a species, belief, I'm not very cool with the science part of this, but like every species, we have this thing to keep perpetuating ourselves, right? To keep spreading. For humans, belief is part of that process. If humans didn't believe, we would all just die.
So what do we do when there's a belief system? I'm looking at this objectively of all different belief systems when they claim truth to those things. For example, there's certain beliefs that say that they understand love. There's certain religions and certain beliefs that say this is how you should raise your kids.
Right.
I believe that we should question which one are we going to look at objectively when there's all these different claims. How do we create an epistemology to understand which one's the correct one?
I don't know that we need to. It's sort of like, let's say, asking me the question of, well, which one do we pick is right? We can't, because they're all right and they're all wrong. And if you look at the Christianity, if you look at Judaism, if you look at Islam, and you start to really find comparisons, what you're going to find is, in most instances, besides the names, the dates, and the places, they all are talking about the same thing. One of the things I find interesting is that there's the core belief system of the religion, and then there's the rules for applying it, okay? We get confused that somehow the rules for applying it are the faith. That's not faith. The Bible is this crazy book written over a long period of time where there was a point in which, they had to say to the people, hey, don't mix your meat and your dairy because it'll make you sick. These are just rules for existing for humanity. That's not belief or faith. That's rules for humanity to live. Two completely different things that somehow people tend to kind of mush together. And so we have to learn to, for me, you have to create a way to separate the faith, which is, if you look at all the different religions, even if you go back to the pagans, love each other, love your earth, take care of each other, all there. They're all exactly the same. So to me, they're all the truth. What's different is, okay, that guy says his religion says don't cut your hair. That religion over there says cut your hair. Okay, those are just rules for existing in the reality.
When we talk about these realities, including God and these faiths, we've, like you said, in pagan religions, we've had so many different gods on this planet. Some of them we don't even debate anymore. But what makes it any less valuable or any less reality that Zeus could be real or that Ra could be real? What is the significance of the faith? Why believe in any of these faiths?
I think because for people, like I said, it makes them feel better. It just makes you feel better. I like that I have my belief system, which is really inclusive. I'm super inclusive. As long as you're not going to hurt, physically harm me, you could believe whatever you want to believe. But I like that. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel connected to humanity, which is what we humans want. I love it that I can pretty much on a day, I could walk into any church on this planet, and have a beautiful experience with the people that are there. And I love that. That makes me feel good. Some other group, humans also like community. We feel better when we have a community around us. We feel safer. So one of the things that churches provide is a sense of community. It's great to know that, God, if I have something that happens in my family, I could go to my pastor and say, my husband lost his job and I can't feed my kids and I need help. And that community will gather around me and support me. And especially now, it used to be a lot easier because we lived in tribes, right? We had a community. Now we are more and more and more spread out into the world, that one of the only places that we can find community is in a church.
And that's actually what actually concerns me too, because we talked about this last night, sometimes those community end up being very dangerous. We talk about cults, we talk about people who have that still sense of when, Charles Manson had that sense of community, David Koresh had that sense of community, ISIS has that sense of community, the people in Indiana passing laws, they have that sense of community. At which point are we going to critically think and say maybe their sense of community is outweighing our rational thinking?
Well, let me start by saying
And I like you to talk about the cult we were talking about last night too.
Let me start by saying this. There are I think 7 billion people on this planet, right? And if you start to just look at it statistically for just a minute, of the 7 billion people on the planet, I would say 699 billion of those people are not going to hurt each other. They're not in groups or communities that are wanting to cause harm. The percentages, and I don't want to diminish the suffering that is going on this planet. I don't mean to do that, but I want to put it into perspective for a second, because I think it's really important. And I think that's one of the things that we don't do enough, is that humans tend to look at the ISIS and the crazy things that are going on, and we start focusing on that, and we go, oh my God, the world is a mess, look at all these bad things that are going on. And we spend so much time focusing our energy there, fear, that we don't even think about or pay attention to the 6 billion other people on this planet who are supporting each other, who are helping each other. So first, let's put that into perspective for a second. That's the way I look at things. And then I look at the place like Indiana. I look at what happened in Kenya. That was just insanity, crazy, in the name of God. But the truth is that if you actually begin to look at any of these tragedies that occur, it's not really in the name of God or religion. They use that as a mask because it sounds better. Typically, wars, horrible massacres, it's more about politics than it is about religion. Religion's just a sexy word to put on it because it tends to make people... It's easier for me to convince that mass of people over there who are really just good Christians. They're really nice people and they wouldn't normally harm people. But for me, if I go over them and say, okay, you good Christians, here's the deal. See all those Muslims over there? They're going to come over and kill you if you don't get over there and kill them. And I stir them up in the name of God, they'll go do my bidding. But in the end, it's not about God. It's just that God is the excuse.
Where are they getting the information from?
What do you mean? What?
Well, like when we look at the Crusades, when we look at a lot of wars on this planet for thousands of years have happened from religious ideology. I think it comes from ideology, period. But when we look at religions, we look at God commanded everyone to kill the Canaanites. They commanded in the Bible and the Quran them say
politics used to get people to do what you want. Have you ever read The Art of War?
Yeah.
So remember, in The Art of War, there's like a list of ways to control the masses. One of them is to keep them divided and in fear. What's the best way to make people afraid? Tell them a big, nasty God that they can't see and no one can prove exists is going to come and mess with them. An unseen force will come at you and you have no control over it unless you do what I want it to do. Every war that's been fought on this planet has been fought over money and land and resources. No, but here's the thing. Religion is the excuse. It's the one thing that we can get the ignorant people. That's what they use. That's why they like to keep people, another part of the art of war, keep them uneducated. Right? If they're uneducated and all you do is you talk about you better behave or God is going to come after you. And by the way, I'm the only one that can talk to God. You cannot talk to God. And God just told me that you need to go over there and kill those people. Meanwhile, me, the pastor or the leader of the king or the queen or whatever, realizes that really, I just want them to go kill those people because I want that land because I just found out that there's oil under there or I just found out there's this under there. And see, this is the thing that we miss. People like to say we're killing in the name of God. We're not actually killing in the name of God. We're just using God as our mechanism to convince people to kill.
A lot of these people also believe that, let's say we don't create any war, that if we don't follow these commandments, we'll be sent to this eternal place of damnation
right,
and
because
hell.
we've been told that over and over and over again for centuries.
Sometimes I feel that's a form of fear and abuse, especially when you tell it to a young child and doing that. But I think it stops people from rationally looking at their arguments about why they believe what they believe.
It does.
And that's the question that I have: is why do you think that they don't
because we
question
haven't been,
it?
Because we have been taught not to question. We are programmed to follow. And what's happening in this world right now, which I think is awesome, and I think, it's a scary time. I have 2 little kids, and part of me would love nothing more for them just to have a little happy life and everything to be easy. But, since the beginning of time, there have been those that have questioned, and there have been those that have said, wait a second, this isn't quite right. And that's part of humanity too. That's what keeps us moving forward, by the way. That's why we are where we are, is because there's always somebody who's going to go, the sun doesn't do that, or the moon doesn't do that, or why is that there? But in the end, essentially, for most humans, we are pack creatures. And you know what? It's so much easier that if you just said to me, Betsy, your job, you're going to follow me and I'm going to tell you what to do. And I go, I don't have to think about this. Cool. Where are the shoes? Did you tell me where the shoes were? I mean, that's kind of easy for us. That's our brains are kind of programmed for find safety, find shelter, find food. And when we have that covered, for the most part, we're not driven to do much anything else.
When we talk about open-mindedness, okay, I know I get accused a lot of time of being closed-minded as a skeptic. And so one of the things I always look at is when I'm looking at all different belief systems, whether people that believe that 9/11 was an inside job, whether there's chemtrails, vaccinations, whatever else, I tend to find that every time I question any one of these systems, I hear the same argument that I'm closed-minded about. What I'm trying to figure out is, why do you think that they're addressing me when I don't believe nobody believes everything? Everyone have beliefs.
Everybody wants to be right.
Right, but why do you think that is?
Because it's safer to be right. Because when I'm right, then I'm safe. It's a very simple situation that we're existing in. We humans think we're a lot more evolved than we really are. The truth is, for most of us, all we want to do is feel safe. We are living day to day, moment to moment, chasing safety. And when you come into my worldview and start to ask questions about it, you're messing with my safety. And I will kill for that. Because at our core level, we are programmed for survival. And if you're going to question my worldview tips over, I can't survive, my family can't survive, so I'm going to kill you.
Do you think that that's the reason why we have these beliefs, is because we have a sense, I look at it as we have a sense of secure, we don't have certainty. There's so much uncertainty and anxiety. And anytime we don't have certainty and anxiety in our own lives, we'll turn to things. We'll turn to drugs, we'll turn to sex, food, religion, other things. The question I have is, then what's the difference? If I have an addiction to drugs, if I have an addiction to other things that create dopamine in my mind, what's the difference between me having a belief system that creates the dopamine for me to believe it? If you just said I could be killed for that belief.
There is no difference.
But then if my life is in danger because of someone else's belief, is that a problem?
Well,
because you're right.
I mean, is it a problem? Well, I would love it if we could all just get along, and be cool. That'd be nice. Is it a problem? It's the human condition. It's why we're here. We would never know pure love and joy if we did not know pure suffering and fear. It's how we've defined things. You know what I mean? It's like you can't know, oh, everything is great if you didn't know that everything wasn't. And so that it's just what we're doing here. I don't know that it's possible for humanity to get to a place where everybody agrees. Yeah. And I don't think we're designed for that. You know, if you think about in Christianity, I mean, God made all these different types of people, right? If God wanted us all to get along, then he would have just made us all exactly the same. You know, but if there's a God and he created us, then he didn't. You know, he created differences. And so some would say he gave us free will. You and I were talking about whether free will even exists. I think to some degree, free will kind of exists in the sense that I feel like in my life, I have come to a place where I'm in charge of the choices that I make. And when I take that responsibility, there was a video the other day of some redneck guy talking about racism. Did you see that? It's really powerful because what he says is total redneck guy, and he's on his cell phone, and he's got this thick Southern accent, and he's like, you know, I used to be racist and call people this and call people that, and then I realized that they're human like me. He had this whole epiphany. It's beautifully, I mean, you got to read it. It's really beautiful. And that happens. And that happens daily with people, but we have to get there. And so, you know, all the stuff that's going on, all the horrible things that are happening is consciousness, collective consciousness, and humanity processing. And it's not pretty, and it's scary, and it's sad, and it's horrific. But what I've realized in my own life is like, I'm not going to change all of humanity. You know, I made a movie that has been seen all over the world by millions of people, you know? That's rare that people get the opportunity to do that. I can't even believe that I did that, right? But did I change the world? No. Did I change a bunch of people? Did I change them? You could say that. What did I do? I gave them information. So my work in my life is like, we talk a lot about, you know, in the world is like, be in service. How can I be in service? So the way that I want to be in service to the world is that I just want to be open to growing and expanding, and like that guy who said I was a racist and then I realized they're human like me, and then I expanded my worldview. I want to be willing enough to do that and example that, and I want to make movies where people can have the opportunity to see that, but I can't force them to do it. And I also can't get locked into this space of like, oh my God, look at these horrible people. You have to be an activist, but you also, I think, for me, we've spent a lot of time being activists from a place of fear. Like, we constantly, if you don't change this is what's going to happen. So, and the more we do that, I think we're causing just as much harm as the Christian fundamentalists who say, if you don't do this, those people. We have to I try to come at this sort of these ideas from a place of really love and understanding, and not frightening people and not scaring them, because the only way humanity is really going to change is if we can get out of fear.
You know, you actually brought up a good point, especially with the racism thing. One of the reasons why I question beliefs a lot is, for example, let's look at America for a minute. You know, there was a time when the perception of a white male was, you know, I had to own a black slave. Women could not vote. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we look at it now, and that perception is not an accurate belief to have. It's not accurate into reality. One of the things I realize is when you question reality, you get closer to understanding reality to where you can make better decisions.
Right.
When you talk about fear, sometimes that is the mechanism to change. And what I mean by that is not this over-exemption of fear. Right. But like, for example, we look at climate change. Mm-hmm. We look at vaccines. Okay, right. For me, I look at it and say, look, there's imminent problems on this planet. And when people are locked into that belief system, right. Okay, I don't want to use fear, but the reality is we have serious problems. And we need to be questioning these beliefs and saying, are these processes reliable to solving problems?
Well, there's two different kinds of fear that you're talking about. There's sort of like there's that fear of like, oh, if we keep heading that way, we're going to fall off a cliff. We need to figure out how to not fall off a cliff. That's sort of like a good kind of fear. But there's also the fear, what happens is when you realize you're going to fall off the cliff and you turn around to everybody and go, if you don't kill everybody right now, we're all going to fall off the cliff. So it's like, what do we do with the fear? How do we use that? And right now we're using that in a way in which keeps people down, keeps people ignorant, keeps people controlled, and makes them do crazy things to each other.
There was a guy here on December 21st, 2012, right on Bell Rock, and he thought, like a lot of people, including me to some extent, that there would be this frequency shift, and he almost jumped off of Bell Rock. I started studying Sedona a lot, and Sedona wasn't always the most spiritual place until the 1980s. And I think the one thing I question is I notice a lot of people come here because they think they hear voices in their head. They think they're going to come here and have a spiritual enlightenment. I worry about people who just pick up and just move their entire life for some voice in their head telling them to go do something. I did the same thing. Me and my wife decided we're just going to come here for a spiritual enlightenment.
And nothing bad happened. Look at the great things that did happen to you.
But as I've been here, that's what's made me question is a lot of the claims that are here.
People are searching. People.
I don't think there's anything wrong with searching. I think the question is what are we really searching for? Do we want something to make us feel better, or do we want to know the truth?
No, most people don't want to know the truth, Ben. Most people just want to feel better. The truth is, and I like I want to know the truth, but I'm not going to go crazy searching for it. I'm going to do it in a sort of more laid back, mellow, this is interesting, oh, that's interesting kind of way. But, most people, Ben, really don't care about the truth. Most people just care.
Why do you think that is?
Because I think most people just want to eat and have a nice life and die.
And watch Game of Thrones.
And watch
I can't get that in there, but
yeah, and that's what they want. Most people want. Most people are really simple, and in our core, that's all we really. I want to live a happy life. I want to take my kids on vacation. I want to be able to drive my car, and I want to, be able to buy shoes, like this super simple, basic stuff, right? Most of us are like that. Now there are the dreamers and the people that do, want to spend their life searching all over the planet. That's their calling. That's their meaning. That's their mission. We all have simple meanings in life. What's meaningful to us, and that's what we do.
I don't have a problem with that at all. Into the sense that some people, you're right. They just want to raise their kids. They're just trying to make. Life is hard. Let's be real about it. But for some people that want to find truth, when we look at these stories, if we look at Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, they're stories of trying to discover truth. And philosophers for a very long time have tried to figure out, what is truth? What is reality? Why are we here? These are big questions.
Right.
And for me, I felt when I believed these things, that's what I was trying to do. That's genuinely what I was trying to figure out. Was like, if these are paths to truth, how can I know them the best that I can know them to do?
That's your journey.
If there was a prophet here that stated that these were the paths into doing it, I wanted to know why did they know that and how do I get to know that?
Great.
But as I've taken this journey, I realize a lot of these are just parables within themselves throughout time that humans have told to kind of understand the world. It doesn't mean we were stupid. It doesn't mean we were dumb.
And it was true in that moment because that's what they knew.
But now we also live in a reality right now where science does explain a lot of things. And I feel like the thing that frustrates me a lot of the times is like when people come in and they try to debate evolution to prove God, and yet that doesn't prove anything. You can ask questions, like we had the conversation last night. We can ask questions. We should always ask questions. I would always tell the spiritual community, ask questions. We could be wrong. It's okay for us to be wrong. But when someone claims that they know something and disregards someone who actually has tried to prove something, it's a little frustrating. It's
you have to you're taking all that very personally. Like there's always going to be somebody who claims they know something, and most of the time they're claiming that they know something because they're going to sell you something right afterwards.
Well, it's okay if it's your personal belief, but if you go into the educational system and you say, okay, we're going to take out the process of evolution in our science classes, and we're going to teach that Moses was a founding father, like they are doing in Texas.
Right. Then
that's a problem in our educational system. That's a real problem.
Then don't live in Texas.
But now we're teaching kids wrong information.
We're not. But here's the thing: I can go to Texas and have that battle, and there are people in Texas having that battle already, right? So I don't. Luckily, I don't have to go there. But because that's what's meaningful for them. You're on a quest for truth, right? So that's your journey. But with love and respect, I say to you that you should never stop that. That's your passion. But what I would caution you is that you don't try to push your worldview onto somebody else while railing on them about them pushing their worldview on you. You're very angry, and I rightfully so, that who are these people to say this is the truth when I know this to be the truth? And the reality is, yes, science has said all this stuff, but you know what? Science changes their mind a lot too. And so for me, I look at it and go, well, here's the crazy idea. Let's just not make it about God or right or wrong and just look at the science. But people don't do that, and we have to just take a step back and say, okay, I'm on a quest for truth. This is my journey. I'm not going to get angry at that guy because that guy says he knows the truth. I'm going to look at his truth and go, okay, it doesn't resonate with me. Next. We have this tendency to want to be right and to win. And that's where the problems arise. For the Christians, for the Jews, for the Muslims, for the atheists, for the skeptics, we get into clashing when we want to fight over being right. And the truth that I hold on to is that, you know what? None of us actually really know. Nobody actually can prove how we got here. We have a lot of really cool theories, much of which we can back up with the current science that we have now. So because I like science, I'm going to go, okay, those guys over there look like they've figured some stuff out. But I also know that it's very likely that most of the stuff they think they know now, 20 years from now, will change. And it has. So if we could all, my wish is we could all just get there. If we could all just get to that place of being like, I kind of just want, what's my value? I'm not one of those people, At the end of the day, I don't really have to know if there's a God or a dog or, if I'm inside of a snow globe of an alien. None of that really, at the end of the day, I've kind of come to the place in my life where I go, what do I value? What is it that I really value? And I realized I value my family. I value my friendships. I value creating opportunities for people to have more knowledge and more information. I want to do that. And that's my focus in the world. And I'm going to let all the other people argue out who's right. And that's what they're going to do. That doesn't mean that I should, when crazy people like the Westboro Church try to do something, that I shouldn't stand up and go, guys, I don't like that. Yes. I get frustrated a lot with the New Age community, when I try to open a film. I'll open a film in a market, and I have to beg people to go see the movie. These are all the people that we wish it was more like this. We wish that, and they don't want to put their money where their mouth is. I'm helping a friend on a film right now, which has a very strong faith-based audience. And though I'll tell you what about those Christians put their money where their mouth is. Every time. You want to know why what's going on in Indiana is going on in Indiana? Because the Christian community in that community will put their money behind those politicians. Marianne Williamson tried to run for Congress. She couldn't get elected, mostly because most of the spiritual people don't put their money where their mouth is. So that really irritates me, right? That's my beef. It's like, you guys want to rail on the Christians for all that they're doing. Use this, go at it with the same veracity that they do. You're also busy meditating your way into stuff. You have to be an activist. You have to be a spiritual activist. But at the end of the day, my getting riled up and angry and frustrated, it's not going to solve it. I just have to keep focusing on, I have to keep saying that. I have to keep repeating that. I have to keep energizing people. And that's the way I know how to do it.
Do you think it's valuable to question people when it comes to, and you brought up a good point with even with money. One of the things that frustrates the hell out of me is when I see someone like Joel Osteen who has like $600,000 a day to preach about God, or Benny Hinn, who's a faith healer. And in fact, let's talk about faith healer, because that's one of the reasons why I bring awareness is somebody has arthritis or somebody has cancer, and they're going to these faith healers, and spending a lot of money, not even really getting healed, but they don't know anything else about it. Do you think it's important to question that and bring awareness to it?
I think it's always important to question everything. I do, right. But I can't force anybody else to do it. People, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make the horse drink. I think it's important. I think we're in a time when there's more information available to us. And I think it's almost a detriment. I have a very good friend who's writing a book right now about her journey to healing herself of cancer. And one of the things that she says in the book is stop Googling stuff. you're actually causing yourself more harm. And she's saying, I'm not suggesting that you not educate yourself. What I'm suggesting is you learn a little discernment. That you start to realize that, hey, just because I read it on the internet doesn't mean it's true, but we'll get there. People will get there, or they won't get there. It's also really interesting if you think about what's coming out in terms of science. Science will now tell you that you're more likely to heal yourself from cancer sitting in a dark room meditating, if you believe with every ounce of your being that will heal you of cancer, than going and do chemotherapy. You have better of a chance of healing, because what did we say in the Bleep? The way we think, our bodies, our brains impact what we think impacts our health. And now that 10 years ago, I was a nut job for putting a movie out that said that. Now CNN is running story after story about this new crazy science. So that's why for me, the person that wants to go to the faith healer, if that's working for them, and even if it's not healing their body, it's healing their heart, so be it. At some point we have to take personal responsibility. At some point we have to put on our big girl panties and say, wow, I just blew $25,000 on some guy who said he was going to heal me, and you know what, he was a charlatan. And I can blame him, or I can step back and go, you know what, I probably should have researched that guy a little more. We have this tendency to not take personal responsibility for our shit and our stuff, and we need to. I don't get to blame everybody on the planet because I did this, or this happened to me, or that happened to me. To some degree, things happen to people, and that's terrible. And yeah, we can say the gunman that walked into this college in Kenya and killed all those people, yeah, they're bad people, and they deserve to be dealt with.
One of the other reasons why I question beliefs is not just because I want to attack religion and spirituality. I love psychology. I love understanding the human mind, but I'm also trying to understand mental illness. Mm-hmm. And I think it needs to be brought up more. And sometimes when I'm looking at people with mental illness, sometimes I feel like they're turning to these systems and maybe not getting the help that they need to doing that. So one of the things I explore is stress. Stress is a motherfucker. We all know this. But one of the things I tend to notice, and not just turning to spiritualism, but we turn to drugs, we turn to sex, gambling, whatever it is. Why do you think we have such a hard time dealing with stress? And why does it cause us to, what do you think it causes the irrational way for us to think? Like, how does it stop our thinking? Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, okay, so I think we have a hard time dealing with stress because we take everything so seriously. I don't mean to, again, I realized in my own life, like I was taking everything like as it was the end all be all. This was it. Like a great story is my daughter. She gets so mad at me when I tell stories, but recently my kids are like the greatest teachers I have. Like I'm learning about how we become human and how we attach meaning and how we end up who we are. There's nothing like watching your child grow up to go, oh, now I know why I believe what I believe. Now, because it's like a long-term scientific observation. But, kids, they don't have as much of a sense of length of time as we do either, right? So, my daughter was really upset one day because she thought we were talking about maybe putting her in a middle school that wears uniforms. And my daughter loves to put on cool outfits, right? And I looked at her and I said, look, it's not going to kill you. And she looked at me and with every ounce of her being believed to be true in that moment, she looked at me, she said, yes, it is going to kill me. And in that moment, she absolutely believed that to be true, right? Because she doesn't know that, oh, maybe it's only 2 years, or she doesn't have that concept of time in her head yet. So for her, the middle school is her entire life, right? So I think about that and I look at the way I live my life and I do the same thing. I forget that like this moment, this interview is like, not even a nanosecond in my life, right? And I'm sorry to bring up Buddhism, but I learned this really through Buddhism and the concept of impermanence, right? Once I was able to realize that life is this, and that the best way that I could manage my stress was to sit back and ride it, to not try to hold on to it and control it so much. But for most people, we're not taught how to do that. You want to talk about the educational system. Emotional intelligence is not taught to our children. Most people go through their entire life never learning emotional intelligence, right? Like, why isn't that in schools? So, I could fight my school system to try to put that in there, or I could just say, okay, and this might seem selfish, but, I'm a believer of change myself, teach my kids the best, and it's like exponentially it grows out, right? I do a lot of work in terms of all the films that I make are really about uplifting humanity. 10 years ago, right before I took the Bleep, I was offered another movie at the very same time, which would have done no help for humanity. Okay, there was not an uplifting line in the entire movie. It was just another schlock, cheesy, late night movie, right? And I had these two choices, and I said, I only want to make films that are going to uplift humanity. I made that choice, right? So, those are the kind of choices hopefully people start getting to in their lives. And more people because I'm starting to see it that way, I see more and more people making those choices of saying, you know what? I went and I ran the rat race. Okay? I did the house, I did the car, I did the kids, and I was miserable and I was sick, because stress causes illness, right? And they had to step back and go, okay, I'm choosing something different. I see that happening more and more and more. You can buy a Buddha statue in Walmart, right? And I love looking at that, because what does that say to me? That says, if you look at the art section in like Walmart or Target, they have these big posters for like love, believe, happiness, joy. People are decorating their homes with those words. So I think that there's a shift actually occurring, and I think people are realizing like, oh, I don't have to take everything so seriously. I can lighten up. This moment where it really hurts right now because of whatever, a loss, a death, a breakup, I want to experience this pain, but I don't have to be here forever. And when you can realize that, you have a much less stressful life.
Why do you think we need love so much?
Well, I think that we've confused love with community and survival. If he loves me, I'm safe. If he loves me, I'm worthy. If he loves me or she loves me, then I'll have. And that's because from the moment we're born, we are sort of taken out of our internal power and taught that you won't survive unless your mother feeds you. You won't survive unless your dad does this. And we start to learn to rely on others for fulfillment, which is important because, if you're a baby and you don't get fed, you die. But what we do is that we don't then learn the emotional intelligence parts. We don't learn to become self-reliant in certain situations. And so we begin to look outside of ourselves for everything, because we don't think I'm capable of loving anything, or I can't love myself because I have to get it from out there. We're not taught that, a lot of what you are seeking, you can fulfill within yourself.
Like I said before, I tend to notice a lot of times a lot of systems use love in order to
control.
Well, let's take not only the belief systems, but even in some domestic violence relationships, it starts off as being, oh, I love you, I care about you, and sometimes, and I think you're the one even said this about seeing signs and knowing like, but you're ignoring the signs. Do you think there's a correlation between the same thing when you get into religious, occult, ignoring the signs, ignoring critical thinking? Same thing
Absolutely.
When people get into a domestic violence relationship?
We'll do anything for love, because it's the one thing that makes us feel safe.
Even if it's not good for us?
Even if it's not, I can tell you, I've been in I look back on relationships now and I see all they call them the red flags, I call them, I wrote a book called Metanoia, and I wrote an essay and I called it the stains on the carpet. You can steam clean a carpet and then it looks really good, but then there are those stains that start coming back after a while that we've always just kind of been there. And you can watch them come back, and we ignore them because we think, oh, I'm going to be different. It'll be different with me because he loves me. And, there's a lot of irrational thinking that goes on around love. And mostly it's because when we feel loved, we feel safe. It always, for me, goes back to the idea that for most people on this planet, all we're really trying to do is just, survive. It's like, what's that movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, The Running Man? It's like we pop out of the vagina into the Running Man movie. And it's like, that's what most of us are doing. We're like, holy fuck, this is crazy time, you know? Like, excuse me, I said fuck. But it is. I mean, think about it. It's like nutso. If you look around the world, you're like, this is insanity. I have to survive this shit? Oh my God. You know, where's my knife? Where's my gun? And how, you know, that's what we're doing most of the time.
I'm going to ask you a question that I don't know if I'm even going to put in the film or not, but you just triggered off something by saying something. Do you think that there's belief systems when it comes to women that have been one way for a very long time that should be changed now? And here's what I mean, and I talk about this with my wife all the time. You know, I've never been gay, never been a woman, never been black, never, you know, I can only know by asking questions.
That you know of, but anyway.
One of the things I feel that is, if I was ever a woman, I never was, I'm just saying,
You are the most spiritual person that I know.
I am not spiritual.
You right now. Yes, you are.
Let me see how I can phrase this question correctly. Why do women value their lives and their images based off of illogical perceptions?
Okay, so here's the thing. Our worldview around the masculine and the feminine is completely fucked up. It is totally whacked. Okay, we are like completely, this is why we are running around like crazy people with machetes trying to kill each other, because we have totally stripped ourselves of our identities. Okay, so we have been bombarded. First of all, women have been murdered and slaughtered and told we were worthless, stupid, and useless for like a really long time, like almost all of our current modern history. Right? Hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years we have been done this. So what happens is that story gets into our genetics. And so when you're born a girl, talk about original sin, women or children, girls, I see it in my daughter all the time. She was born feeling inadequate. So there's not a new science, but it's kind of becoming cool out into the zeitgeist there, is the idea of epigenetics. This experience is in our genetics. And so we wake up into the world going, okay, I'm a failure, I'm useless, and then this guy tells me that the only way I'll be worth anything is if I wear that dress, if I look that way. And we're bombarded with this information. I mean, I see it all the time. Like, you know, my daughter looks at Miley Cyrus and goes, how come I can't look like that? You know, I'm the kind of mom, and I know a lot of moms that are like this, that I show her pictures of Miley Cyrus without makeup and go, do you see the difference? And I want her to see, you know, oh, I get it now. That's all fake. But, you know, we live in a world where right now, because it's been happening so long, that it's a lot easier for us to sit down, zone out in front of the television, and hate ourselves because we'll never look like that. And part of that is intentional. I mean, I'm not a big us and them person. You know, I don't like, you know, I don't like our government. I don't like the way in which the world is being run, but I have to take personal responsibility because I participated in it, you know, so I can't blame everybody. But I do feel like, you know, what's going on in the world right now, to me, is that we are getting to a place where people are starting to sit back and go, this is weird. This is an interesting story. My son was, we were at a parade, and my son, a big whole band of majorettes walked by, or cheerleaders. And my son, who was like 6, looks up and goes, I'm in love. Look at those hot girls. And I laughed, because when a 6-year-old says that, that's kind of funny, you think, right? And so I laughed. I was like, oh, Max, you're so cute. And then like 5 minutes later, I went, oh my God, I totally just perpetuated the chauvinistic, you know, misogynistic male. And it was totally innocent. Like, I would not ever intentionally do that, but it was unconscious. And so I was like, okay, I gotta fix that. So I sat down with him. We had a whole conversation about what love really means, and that love does, just because a beautiful girl walked by in a short skirt, that's not love. And I really had to fix that. But, you know, most of the time, we're all just unconscious, and we're all just reacting and perpetuating the same stories that we keep telling each other over and over again, because it's a lot easier than me being conscious and going, wait a minute, I do not want my son to sit back and catcall the cheerleaders when he's 6, you know? Because most of us would do that. I guarantee you, anybody in this room, if a 6-year-old little boy did something like that, we'd all giggle. We would.
Right.
But until we stop and go, oh, we can't do that, that paradigm was not going to change.
And I think the reason why I also brought that up too is because I think last night I was also explaining how, like in the film that we had watched, you know, how people think atheism is a religion. Okay, and that that annoys the shit out of me more than anything, and I'll tell you why. I don't have to follow anybody's beliefs into doing anything, and one thing I'm actually doing right now is I'm actually questioning other atheists who attack feminism, who say the same things. I don't need to follow anybody who has a worldview that thinks that women aren't this, or they cherry pick it like they do with religion. And I think that's why I get frustrated when people say it's a religion. There's no flag, there's no church for me to go to. I don't have to believe every single thing anybody says. And so I'm calling out even my own shit out of the backyard of my community and saying that the bullshit that they have when it comes to, you know, dogma against feminism, the way that they treat and they cherry pick certain information to doing that. I'm just calling out my shit in my backyard. Does that make sense? And I just want to be clear that that's why I don't believe atheism is a religion. Skepticism is not a religion. It's basically questioning everything, including atheism and skepticism.
There's skepticism, as in, like, I often call myself a skeptic, but I would never. But then there is, again, we're back to the language game. So there's me saying, well, I'm skeptical of that. And then there is me defining myself as a skeptic within that community. Mm-hmm. And if I were to, so people ask me all the time, are you an atheist? And I go, no. Are you an agnostic? I go, no. I'm not labeled. Because we are, one of the other things that the human mind has to do is compartmentalize and label. So I could totally understand how people would think that atheism is a religion. Because essentially they're thinking of it in terms of, well, it's a group of people who all agree and believe in the same thing. Oh, that's religion. So let's just use that word. So technically, it fits. If you look at the definition of religion, usually the end of the definition will usually say something about, usually around a god. They kind of throw that, or a supernatural. But really, what's a cult? What is a cult? What's the definition of cult?
It's basically a group of people who believe something or brainwash people into believing it.
No, brainwash is not part of the word.
But you're programming people to believe something in a cult.
That is not the definition.
Well, then you define the terms that we're arguing with.
So the definition of the word cult is a group of people who are seeking knowledge or information who agree on something.
But they're also conditioned to think something that may not be accurate,
No, that is our new sort of like tainting of the word, because we now have a negative connotation around the word cult.
But here's a difference. Atheism cannot be a religion. And the reason why it cannot be is all atheism is saying is, I have no belief in God.
Right. So they're a cult.
We can, but why would that be a cult?
Well, again, go back to what the definition of the word cult. Do you have a dictionary here?
Got it.
What is?
Pulled up.
Thank you. What is the definition of cult?
Okay, so according to Merriam-Webster dictionary, no, I don't want to play a quiz. What the hell?
I hate it when it does that.
Those damn pop-ups.
All those pop-ups.
Definition of a cult is a small religious group that is not part of a larger and more accepted religion.
That's not the official definition.
Actually, it is.
According to Merriam-Webster.
No, it is. Because even
there's a
the difference between a religion and a cult is actually the numbers of people.
No,
technically.
Let me see that for a second.
Because Christianity started off as a cult too.
Okay, so when I type in cult, I Googled it, okay? This top piece says it's a noun, a system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object, a misplaced or excessive admiration for a particular person or thing, cult of personality surrounding
You have to go to the etymology of the word, because these are all very modern definitions.
And here's translation and...
But what people misunderstand about it is all it is saying it's a lack of belief. It's not telling you to believe something. You can have a lack of belief in unicorns. It doesn't mean you're a cult.
My religion is the religion of unicorns and funny.
But what I'm saying is that it cannot be a religion because it's not telling you to believe in anything.
If you go to the etymology of...
I'm looking at the etymology right now.
Because you'll find that
the Latin version, which is colere.
Because usually it talks about... the word occult and cult came from actually way back when they were talking about the scientists and doctors were occultists, because they were all about gathering knowledge outside of religion. That's what they were talking about. So it was a cult, and it was sort of a secret. And it was the way before medicine was medicine, they were considered an occult because they would keep secret knowledge about an information, and they were a group of people that all followed this particular ideology. So
but everybody is an atheist to an extent because you don't believe in Zeus. You're still an atheist to that God.
Well,
you don't believe in the Quran's version of the God necessarily. You don't believe in Ra. So everyone's an atheist to an extent. It's just I believe in one less God or one. You know what I'm saying? So that's why it's not a religion because everyone technically is an atheist to an extent. It's just
what happens
which gods do we not believe in?
But that's what happens with language. It's like the reason why people say, if I think about atheism right now, I automatically have a little bit of a negative feeling about it. Mostly because most of the people that want to identify themselves as atheists lately are the loud, obnoxious ones who are kind of assholes, right? That's the people that I keep seeing as identifying as atheists. There's probably a whole group of atheists that are really cool that I probably get along with great.
Why do you think they are assholes? I mean, because we are an angry group. We are very vocal.
You are.
But why do you think that is?
Well, I think that people just get really angry because they want to be agreed with, and they're tired of this whole, now look at those Christians, they've been popular for too long. They need to, I want to be there. We're right and they're right. It's a big battle about who. It's like we literally are all 5 years old. We're all hanging out in a sandbox, and we're all fighting over the shovel of truth.
Do you think that there's a level of frustration when it does feel like they're banging their head up against walls to people that are using a lot of irrational?
Like it.
Well, there's nobody liking something when you're trying to prove an idea.
Let me ask you a question, Ben. Do you like your life?
Yeah.
Are you having fun?
Sometimes.
Are you having fun right now questioning this stuff?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have a lot of fun when you're out at night debating somebody about something that you
Me, personally, yes.
Great. So you know what? You like it.
But I want to also be correct in my reasoning.
I know you want to be right. I get
So
that.
just because I do doesn't mean I can correlate other scientists and other people who are trying to debate these actual topics.
I'm love the debate. You will never find the truth because the minute you find the truth, your fun will go away.
I don't believe that. How do you know that?
I don't.
Exactly.
I'm just making a prediction.
No, but that's what I'm trying to get is that we challenge these beliefs. That's what I'm trying to say
I technically don't believe anything, and I believe everything all simultaneously.
What do you think this is?
This, meaning the room or
this experience,
reality?
the people, the reality, the universe. What do you think this is?
I just think it's an awesome trip. It's like a fun ride. I'm just like, I can't define it, but I'm sort of just like loving it all. I mean, I think it's all really awesome and cool. I mean, is it real? I don't know.
Are they valid questions to ask, like to say, well, what is this?
I think for you they are. They absolutely are because that's your part, that's your passion, that's your soul.
And for thousands of years, we've always asked these questions. I think they're phenomenal questions.
They are. And for thousands of years, we've had people like you to do that. And I love that. I love that. I think it's awesome. And I mean, in some way, I'm on my own journey. But what I was addressing here was like, you said frustration and we bang our heads up. And I said part of that is because you wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, no, for me, my frustration is knowing people are making illogical, like I was saying earlier, the guy who thought a UFO ball ran into the World Trade Center, and then he's calling me stupid. I'm also a human outside of this, and so I get frustrated because, let's look at it rationally. That's a frustrating argument when you know there's no logical explanation to it. And we do run into those arguments a lot.
You said look at this rationally. So that's your way of looking at it rationally. Here's my way of looking at it rationally. My way of looking at it rationally is to just really be amused with that dude and to not engage him, but to laugh my ass off at him. That's my rationale. Everybody okay over there?
Yeah, the pillow behind you is sliding, so now there's this dark spot.
Okay.
There you go.
Well, I like I said, what I'm trying to do.
So I want to say one thing though. I'm going to say something.
I want you to.
You use the word rational a lot. Okay? And so I want to just invite you to understand that the way you perceive rational and the way I perceive rational are very different. One, because you're a male and I'm a female, and we have totally different ideas about what rational is. Okay? And two, you can say it's very rational for me to get up in the morning and eat my breakfast and go to work. That's a very rational way to live. And I can look at you and go, that's not very rational at all. You talk about logic. So we have these you're using very scientific definitions like of logic. Logic says it should go 1 + 1 = 2. That's logic, right? But it's also possible within science for them to go, well, it depends on this one is, and it depends on, what if it's 1 apple and 1 orange? That doesn't actually equal 2. It might equal 2 things, but it doesn't actually equal 2 of the same things. So now we've kind of screwed up logic. So you have to, like, I think for me, what I try to do is to not hold so tightly onto these things. What's rational and logical for you is to undoggedly, passionately, ferociously question everything, which is awesome. And for me, I kind of do the same thing that you do, just kind of in a different way.
When you question it, because you're right, what I'm questioning is the process. How do we come to the information? Because you brought up a good point. Peter Boghossian, I interviewed for the film, philosophy professor, saying there's different processes of how we determine how to do something. For example, he brought up, and I'm paraphrasing, unfortunately, there's a hole in his bathroom door, okay? I have 3 possibilities, okay? Either somebody punched the door, either the hole appeared by itself, or my dog barked and it made it happen, okay? Oh, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. There's a hole in my door. There's 3 ways to repair it. Either I can fix it myself, I can call someone else to do it, or my dog is going to fix it, okay? Each one are valid arguments, but how do you determine which one is the one that's the correct way to solve the problem?
Well, I would look at it like this. I'm going to get really annoying. Sorry. I would say there is no correct way to solve the problem except the way that you want to solve it.
Okay, but the thing is that the problem has to be solved.
Great. So then you have one way of solving it, and I have another way of solving it, and both of those are correct.
But if the dog can't actually fix the door, why do I even acknowledge that?
Maybe because the dog walks by and pees on the door and ruins the wood, and now I have a 4th option, which is I have to buy a whole new door.
But if we're just talking specifically
so then
about
the dog technically.
But if we're talking specifically about this hole in the door.
Does that make sense? No, but you're trying to control the parameters. I said to you, it's possible.
Well, we do have to control some parameters because there's parameters within the physics of reality.
Well, kind of, but not always. Parameters can change. You said the dog could fix the door, and I was like, well, you asked me a question. How would that happen? So I thought to myself, okay.
Can the dog fix the door?
Well, and so I thought about that. I went to that one first because I'm weird. I'm like, could the dog fix the door? And I thought, well, actually, there is a way for the dog to fix the door. You have to think outside of the box in terms of, is the dog going to get a hammer and some putty and a putty knife and a paintbrush and fix the hole? No, but the truth is the dog could walk by the door and pee on it and really ruin it, in which case the dog would have totally screwed up the door and I have to get a new door, which would mean that the dog technically fixed the door.
No, but you fixed the door, not the dog. You're still the one repairing the door.
That's your perception. It's just the way I perceive it.
But that's what I'm saying. He didn't actually fix the door. You had to do a different change of process.
Or the guy that came in to reinstall the door actually.
Sure, but it wasn't the dog specifically fixing the door, correct?
Not necessarily.
Well, how did he fix the door himself?
Because he peed on it, and so therefore he made it completely unusable.
But he just peed on it.
Right, in a way that was fixing the door.
And somebody else fixed it, correct?
Possibly.
Right, so the process of what we're looking at is
But you didn't
say
that the dog had to use the hammer and nails. You just said the dog could fix the door.
But did he actually fix the door? All he did was pee on the door.
Right, and in a way that was fixing it. It's all about interpretation and perspective. I see the dog is fixing the door.
But who actually, so if there was no humans that ever touched the door and he pissed on it, how did he fix the door?
Maybe he made the door better.
How? Maybe
the door looks much better with pee on it.
Is there still a hole?
Maybe, and maybe I like the hole now. There's a rabbit hole I could take you down forever.
That's what I'm trying. But that's what I'm trying to get at is that like rationally, if you're looking at having to fix the actual hole in the door.
But you're just judging my interpretation
not yours.
Not rational.
No, what I'm saying is
it's very rational.
But I'm saying in the process, if I actually have to fix the hole in the door,
right.
I can't depend on the rationality that the dog is going to fix it. Like I have to come up with a solution to actually fix the door.
That's the difference between
I can have the perception to say I like the hole. You're right.
That's the difference between I think you and I, and maybe is that I open up to all potential and possibility, which is why for me, maybe in life there are more truths, because I'm like, well, if you want to lay down the law, which is the only way the way to ask that question is the only way this door can be fixed is that the hole must be filled with putty and painted over. If you said that and then you said the dog you or you hire a handyman, then I would have to step back and go, logic tells me that unless I have a really talented dog, the dog can't do it. But that's not what you asked. So again, we have to get really, you said who's going to fix the door, and then you didn't really define fixing. So I was like, well, fixing could mean a lot of things. Fixing could mean that the door is replaced. So I just kind of went way outside of the box.
So let's look at the context of this.
I rock Common Core.
Is there a more reliable process than others?
Well, I think that there probably is for different situations. I mean, look, we all have our ways of doing things. I have a tendency when, I make the bed a certain way every time because I like the way that works. But Brian comes in and makes the bed a different way. So that's his reliable way. But what I think, and you think about it in terms of the scientific method, I love the scientific method. I think in terms of what it's given us so far, I think it's really done a lot of good for us figuring shit out, right? But, I also believe that sometimes you have to broaden the parameters because you're limiting the outcome, right? And so we have to be willing to sometimes say, like the scientific method, for instance, doesn't work because it doesn't take in anecdotal evidence.
Why
right?
should it?
I'm not saying that it should. I'm just saying that, in our current paradigm, there is a lot of anecdotal evidence that if we took it into consideration would probably change some of the things that we think to be true. And I'm willing to do that to some degree.
Do you think anecdotal and testimony are reliable?
It depends on the situation, but I think that anecdotal evidence can be reliable if handled within a scientific way. I know lots of researchers that are using anecdotal evidence in a very methodical, very discerning way, And I don't always think that expert testimony, for instance, is the right way to go. But if it used in the appropriate way, like I actually can say, I have had out-of-body experiences. Absolutely. I do not need a scientist to tell me that's possible or not possible. Don't really care. I've had it. I have my own experience around it, right? I'm a pretty reliable source. I'm not going to make up stuff.
Time out. Battery's dead.
One of the questions I was asking is, do you think that anecdotal and testimony are reliable for evidence?
I think they can be. I think that you have to be careful. I mean, I made a joke a little while ago in the interview where I was talking about, the best meditators, like how do you get that gig, right? I think that there are times and places in which, if handled properly, anecdotal evidence should be included. And if you listen to the way people describe a certain event and you listen to the languaging they use, you can usually pull the consistencies from that and then throw out the inconsistencies. Now, with that being said, I'm big. I was telling you, I've had out-of-body experiences. I believe that while this body is one part of my reality, that this is only, I'm connected to you, and that I can go for a whole thing on that. But I also believe there's a lot of people that just make shit up, so you have to be discerning.
What makes you think that the out-of-body experience that you encountered was anything that was outside of yourself? And the reason why I say that is because I also had one.
Right.
Okay, when I was 17, I thought I was looking down on my body, but what makes you think that was actually what was happening and not your brain playing tricks on you? I
don't have any evidence to tell you that I can't. Is it possible that my experiences were me just having an imagination or a dream, right? Absolutely possible. But why do I think it was an out-of-body experience? Was that it felt different. It physically felt different to me. One of the things that I like to do is lucid dreaming. And so there are certain things that you do within lucid dreaming that supposedly let you know that you're outside of your body. And there's also a physical experience that I can have when I've been outside my body and I'm feeling like I'm re-entering my body, that I don't have when I'm just having a dream. But does that mean that I can measure it? No.
If there was a logical explanation to it, would it be any less important? For me, it'd have to be, I wouldn't say logical.
I would say if science can prove to me emphatically and without a doubt that it was, in fact, my imagination, then I would probably be willing to let it go. But that's just because that's who I am. But but science can't do that. Science can't do that yet. And they might be able to. We're getting pretty cool, kick-ass machinery and tools going on. So I actually think we're going to get to a place in the next 20, 30 years where a lot of the stuff that we thought was, weird and metaphysical, we're going to go, yeah, like that, that happens all the time. But it would have to be pretty emphatical.
How drastic would your life be if you find out that most of the beliefs, and I'm asking this of all people, how dramatic would your life be if you realized that most of your beliefs probably had a logical explanation and weren't something supernatural? I mean, obviously we're still going to take care of our kids, we're still going to pay our bill, you can still live a good life, but if it was not those beliefs, how different would your life be?
It'd be a little less fun. It's kind of more fun to believe in magic. I mean, look, we're born, we live, and we die. We have 2 ways that we can do this, okay? Or more than 2 ways. But for me, would you rather live... I have to ask myself this question, not you, but me. Would I rather live a life devoid of magic, devoid of surprise, devoid of mystery, and simply know everything is from point A to point B? Which life is more interesting to me? I kind of like the life with magic, so I'm going with that.
Do you think that a life devoid of supernatural makes life any less magical? And what I mean by that is, to me, I think there is a magic to reality without the supernatural.
And you know what?
There's questions about, is there life on another planet? What is this system? Why do we think the way we think? There's so many questions that are out there. I don't feel, for me, being an atheist or being a skeptic, that it makes it any less. Does that make sense? In fact, I feel even more awakened, if we want to use the word, that like, what is this then? If it's not these things, then what is this? Because there's a lot we don't know. Every person on this planet can agree. Scientists, skeptics, believers can say we all don't know. Do you think it takes away the magic?
No, I actually think we're very much the same. I think that is magic, by the way, what you just described.
Okay.
What I was saying was devoid of magic was somebody who doesn't have, doesn't look up at the sky. Like, I have this saying, I want to meet the God who made that. Like, I'm out in the world and I'll see a rock, or I'll see a sunset, or I'll see the Sedona. We were just driving over here and looking at the rocks, and I think to myself, I want to meet the God who made that. That is amazing. Who dreamt that into being? That's magic to me. I would rather live that way than to look up at that rock and go, just a rock.
Okay, that's a great point, but let's look at it from this perspective too, because I think the same way, and I say, if there is no God, I'm now even more interested, how is it there?
Yeah, it's just semantics.
How are we doing it into doing that? And to me, I look at people as the creators. Mm-hmm. We still make art. We still enjoy, like, my spirituality, if we want to call me spiritual, is art, is music. Nothing has to be taken away.
Right.
So
I have a chapter in my book, because I giggle when people say this, the universe provided for me, right? I'm like, who is the universe and why do they have all my stuff, right? And I say that because I think that when we talk about this God or the universe as this thing outside of us who's constantly like this divine vending machine dropping down stuff, we completely take away our power. I think humans are creators. I think humans are creating reality. Are we magically snapping our fingers and having it pop into our hands? Most of us are not. Maybe there's some guy on the planet that is. Maybe Jesus did do that. I wasn't there. I can't prove one way or the other. But what I love is that we're sitting here and there's cameras here that you set up and you designed this shot and you had this creative moment and you put the lights up and you thought about what you were going to ask and we ended up with this conversation, and then you're going to take it and you're going to edit it together and it's going to be something. That's creation.
That's magic to me.
That's magic. I look at that as magic too. So even though we might seem like we're different, I love that. I love that texture. That sort of at a place that a teacher that I once visited called that mass to mass. And they used to say that was bad. Why always create mass to mass? I don't look at that as being a bad thing. I think it's so cool. I mean, everything that exists on this planet, even you could even say the mountains and the flowers. The flowers couldn't grow unless a seed was planted. So we are an integral part of the creation.
Final word. It's your platform.
Oh my God, that's a big platform. Just, we said so much. I think that, I think everyone just needs to lighten up a little bit. Like, seriously, take a chill pill and just love each other. Because we know if we just all stepped back for a minute and just realized that none of us really know, and that we could have a lot of fun hanging out and exploring our differences, that is what life is for. And if we could do that, we'd have a really good time.
Well, Betsy, every single time I talk to you, I learn something. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.